As another year of Exploration Radio draws to a close, it is time to look back on some of the valuable nuggets of industry wisdom our guests have unearthed for us. At the end of each episode, we ask our guests two questions. What is something that must die in our industry, and what is something that must live? That something can be a concept, an idea, a business practice, a mindset, anything. The answers have been many and varied, and they are always a valuable insight into our guests, their approach to life and business. This is part 6 of our Ideas That Must series. I'm your host Ahmad. Come join us and let's explore. So we always end our interview with two questions. So the first one is, what is something, it could be an idea, a concept, a behavior, that you think needs to die in mining, something that we need to get rid of in our industry?
Oh, the boom and bust cycle.
Good one.
I mean, what else? If you're in growing wheat or you're in farming, you have droughts, but you don't have boom and bust cycles where it costs a fortune, where everybody goes out and grows wheat this year and therefore it lowers the price, and then they all go out of business, so the price goes up again, and the expertise is lost, and all of these things. Mm-hmm. There must be a way of getting around this, the sort of thing I've talked about before. Mm-hmm. Adoption by that type of process that CRA had would help towards that. Then it allows you to even out and to have better operations. And
yeah, have you seen the effect of that in your business from when you run tours? Like, I'm assuming you can't really run a tour like this during a bust cycle. I doubt you'll get very many people signing up.
It depends. I mean, my tours to a certain degree are based on what's hot at the time. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've done 2 nickel tours, and they have been at times of high nickel price and everybody's looking for nickel. Yep. The same with iron. I've done iron in the years when everybody wanted to find iron. Mm-hmm. So I can use the cycle. I have to use the cycle then as if it's a year when nickel price is very depressed, well, I'm not going to get somebody come here look for nickel. Yep. That has an effect, but really the thing is that copper and gold are king. They're the things that you can always get somebody to come on.
Yeah, okay. And so the last question, so conversely, what is something that you think we should maintain at all costs, something that is fundamental to our DNA that we should never forget?
Oh, well, in terms of exploration, it's looking at the rocks. Now, because of my background in data and in electronics and you know, in IT and the like, I have been very strong on using data and mining data and interpreting it. But you still have to look at the rocks. You have to know what that data actually means. You know, it's like if you're looking for porphyry coppers, you can have lots of deposits that have the right alteration and they have the right geochemical anomaly, but they don't have enough copper in them. Whereas others will have plenty. You've got plenty of these deposits around the moment that people are flogging with 0.3% copper in, and even mining it through 0.3% copper. But none of that beats 1% copper at Grasberg or Oyu Tolgoi with all that gold in it. So you've still got to appreciate what's going on. You still have to keep getting new data, and you have to know the context of your data.
And I think that's probably a pretty good spot to end on. So thanks a lot for joining us, Mike. This is great.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity.
Cheers. So, Evren, we're getting close to the end of our kind of interview now. So we always ask our guests 2 questions right at the end.
Yeah.
So the first one is, what is something that you think needs to die in our industry? Now you can make it as the mining industry or even just like, you know, something that you're involved in, kind of the software development or the open source kind of industry. So what is an idea, a concept, a behavior that needs to die, something that we need to get rid of?
Well, I'd say one thing that really needs to go away is decision making when it comes. Well, I mean, it's going to be about software procurement. Obviously, it's misusing software for only a fraction of what it is meant to do. So having lots of users be only using 5% of the capabilities of a software, that drives up, costs tremendously and prevents innovation. essentially. But so that's one thing that really in my mind needs to go. Now this is, I think there's many more important things, but from my point of view, where I'm standing, that's the one thing
I think it's a good
that
one.
I can see is that when you have people using full-fledged geological modeling packages, they can do resource estimation, they can do geophysical inversion, they can do, that whole bunch of things. And all that they're doing is plotting points, a point cloud in 3D, and that's, you just think, what's going on here? Why is that? Why do you have to put up with all that clunky mess when this software?
But just as such a specific, a small use case.
Exactly, that is something that you can see all across the industry is not having properly scoped out the needs, and just going for the one size fits all kind of logic, and I'm just going to give them the tool that does everything. But all that you're doing really is you're being played when you're doing that.
I think that's a good point. I think that's an excellent one. I mean, so conversely, last question, what is something that you think needs to be maintained in the industry? Like, something that we can't live without, that's fundamental to our kind of DNA.
I think that what the industry needs most is to put off the blinkers, not be stuck into only what happens in our industry. The mining industry is fairly walled in, let's call it that, fairly sheltered. You need especially decision makers, and even if you're not a decision maker, you are just a geologist, you're logging core, or you are sitting next to a drill all day long, and you've got some ideas and you found some things out there that could serve your needs better. Try to push it up, and if you're a decision maker, don't silence these voices. They're not being negative. They actually are positive voices that are trying to improve things for your company. And I think the mining industry tends to be kind of stuck in a certain way of doing things. And when it comes to it's not only software tools really, but when it comes to maintaining your competitive advantage in a game where it's all about the efficiency. I mean, you make money with a mine by being efficient. You try to decrease your operating costs as much as possible to get as much value of what you can actually produce. So that's what needs to be done. And let's say don't turn this into some kind of generational conflict. Is that a younger geo coming up and making this kind of proposal is not challenging anybody's authority. That's not what they're trying to do. It's just they probably noticed there was something they could do aside fast that this should be valued. Whether it's software and it turns out the more efficient thing is open source or not, that's irrelevant. It's more about that. The mining industry tends to be very slow, and you can see some practices that really are half a century old, and they're still and
they haven't really developed beyond that point.
I mean, one example has nothing to do with software. For example, is having electric trucks go. When you are in electric gear in general, electric powered. Equipment that is going to be used in underground mine sites. It just solves a lot of the ventilation issue, and you increase safety a lot. And this was fairly obvious, and in my mind, it's just starting on some pilot sites, starting to be a thing. In all honesty, it should have been done 30 years ago. Honestly, we could have done it not with batteries, because it's just a cable. Okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be on a battery. At the end of the day, it could be you could just have some electrical wiring going down there, and then you have and then you have your own power plant on site. And by doing this, you're improving safety, and you also are decreasing costs by doing so. And the only reason why it was not, there's technical hurdles, but it is fair to say it took a while because of habits. And I think habits needs to be checked constantly. And a habit should not be misconstrued into a procedure. A habit should not become a procedure without a proper review of why it should be one. And even if you have procedures and ways of doing things, you should review them on a regular basis to make sure you're still up to scratch. And that is what needs to be to be encouraged.
I think that's a great point to end on.
All right.
Thanks for joining us, Evren.
Well,
this was great.
Thank you very much, Ahmad, for taking the time to have me kind of ramble on open source for an afternoon.
That's all right. We'll cut all your ramblings down and edit them in post production, so it's fine. It's all good.
All right.
But no, I think it's good. Yeah, like I think it's interesting. And I kind of made this point before. I think we formally started recording. Yeah, like one of the reasons why I kind of like what you guys are doing is that I think it's a different way to solve a problem or a frustration a lot of people in the industry have, and I think, like to your last point, we should be encouraging a lot more of this kind of thinking, or at least, like irrespective of whether Auslandia or you personally end up being successful in this endeavor, I think the fact that you're giving it a shot and trying to bring these solutions to the industry, I think is a good thing, because I think it's kind of expanding our knowledge base to see that there are different ways to kind of do this. We don't have to be stuck in this kind of,
absolutely.
Like we talked a lot about software. We don't necessarily have to be stuck in this kind of one, simplified, non optimized kind of outcome. We can't test the boundaries to see how we kind of do it. Maybe the best solution for software in mining will actually come from outside the mining industry. It might come from somewhere completely different, right? But we should be a little bit more open-minded and kind of test these things. And I think, like to your point, I think one last thing I'll kind of add to it is that I think in the industry, we're sometimes a little bit afraid of the fact that these efforts might result with nothing. Like it might end up in a failure or a null outcome. And I reckon, stuff it. Like I think, like nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? So we should try these things to see whether they actually end up into a better world. And if they do, great. And if they don't, then like we'll learn something out of it. I can't remember the name of the movie director who said that, do something. If it's good, we'll use it. If it's bad, we'll fix it, but do something. And I think that's kind of the idea, is like, let's just try it and then see how it improves, or where do we get to at the end.
You're right. And when it comes to open source, you have a double incentive to do so, because it is open. If you finance proprietary software development, which happens sometimes, a company is going to finance this startup to develop this, and in the end they finance the startup, and then the startup sells them licenses. Like you're paying twice what was already supposed to be yours, but whatever. I don't know, I'm not the one who signs off these deals. But what happens is that in open source, even if it didn't pan out, the code is out there. It's not like it can just collapse with a company, and if nobody buys up that IP, it's gone forever. That's one of the major points, is that even if it doesn't, everything, even if it doesn't work out, there's this a guarantee that whatever it is that was produced is there for all to see, and you are able to react early on with open source, because you can see it being developed over time. It's not behind closed doors, and all that you ever get to see is a bunch of demos from time to time that are, of course, engineered to look good, and then at the end of the day you realize the whole thing was a mess. Open source is open from the start, so you're able to just run it on your own machine very quickly. And even though it's unfinished, and obviously some things are broken, as long as you understand the concept of an alpha. So this is an advantage that you have in open source, is a clear box development. You can see what's happening, because we don't need to hide it, because it doesn't make we just don't do that. It's open source. It's not something that we worry about. And another point is that when you consider security, as it is something, and being my last point is that often you have this concept of the problem of security in open source. Is there some security flaw in open source software? Well, first, as we mentioned, the overwhelming majority of
I'm not sure proprietary software is as secure as people think it is.
First, but let's be nice. Let's start with the point that, yes, open source is inherently less safe, let's say. Well, the truth is that now the overwhelming majority of proprietary code relies on open source technology. So, it's kind of irrelevant. But let's say, so even if it was true, it doesn't make sense. But actually, it's not true, because there's the last point is a scrutiny. You have scrutiny to open source software. And there's a good reason why all cryptographic algorithms are open source. Would you trust me if I told you, I have a way to encrypt your data such that, nobody can intercept any communications you have with another person? We're using our smart proprietary secret algorithm. No, you don't trust me at all. You're going to tell me, no, I want to know. I want GP,
I mean, the price of your services before you encrypt it will be $1, and after you encrypt it will be $1,000, because now, that would be a pretty good business model.
Yeah, well, that sounds like racketeering, honestly, at this point. But but basically, you get into this this situation where when you describe any safety critical software, it is open source, because it has to be open to the scrutiny of security researchers. And people think, right, you're going to have a proprietary code, so people can't see the code, so people can't find the issue. No, of course they can, because there's no review. Basically, I mean, the review is too limited in scope. You don't have. You basically putting hurdles to the security researchers to actually inform you of the issues that you have in your code, but you're certainly not placing hurdles on hackers who are not trying to understand the flaws definitely and provide remediation for them, which takes a lot longer. They're just trying to brute force. By brute force, I'm not saying that they're going to brute force as a brute force attack, but what I mean is that they're going to try hundreds and hundreds of known flaws. They're going to just go for them until they find the one that is right for them, or they'll decompile your code if there's
a weakness or something like that. That's how
So it's a moot point, as a matter of fact, and we know it because basically nobody trusts security software security protocols. Secure protocols have to be open source. Nobody will trust them otherwise. It's just we have to trust this one random company. No,
exactly. Well, I think we got to let you go, Evren, but thanks a lot for joining us. This was great. It was great to chat to you about the work that you guys are doing at Auslandia and your passion for open source. It was great.
Well, thank you very much. I was happy to share. And of course, if people want to get involved in some of our projects, they can, reach out to us either by mailing me directly, so evren@auslandia.com, or if they're interested in OpenLog, all you got to do is type OpenLog Auslandia on your search engine, and then you'll be able to get to the landing page to the project. Feel free to try it. If you try it, we appreciate feedback. And
and if there's bugs, tell us.
Tell us. Don't just don't just mourn at the screen. Just actually tell us about it, and share the good word. Even if you are not able to contribute, or you don't have the authority to get your company, your organization to contribute, share the good word, show it to others. That's how open source thrives. It thrives mainly. We don't have large marketing budgets. We try to put as much as we can into actual development work. So what we do is that we mostly rely on the fact that open source can spread freely. So help us spread it, even if you're not able to participate. If you think it has value for you, or you think it might have value for somebody else, let them know. They'll appreciate it. We'll appreciate it, and we'll be, everybody's better off at the end. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time, Ahmad. I suppose maybe at IMARC.
Yeah, I'm sure. You and I have a habit of running into each other at major conferences. I'm sure I'll look out for you at the next one that I attend.
All right.
Yeah, you'll be. And we always seem to run into each other at some aisle as we are walking in opposite directions. Let's see if we can keep that streak up.
Yeah,
for the next
well,
one.
I mean, when it comes to IMARC, we have a booth at IMARC, so I think it will be the only booth where there is a QGIS logo, so it's not going to be all that difficult, to figure it out. So, but
no, there we go. Any of our listeners that are at IMARC, you can obviously go and have a chat to Evren at the booth. Just look for the logo.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be that big green QGIS logo. It's booth B26. Normally, it's the Anglo-American sponsored Collab Arena at the on the trade show. That's where we at, and we can.
Jeez, you have a lot more details than I thought you were going to have. So well done.
Oh, it's just I was in the process of filling all these boring forms for the conference. About insurance and who's in charge and. Who the blame should be pinned on in case something goes wrong. And I think to tell them that there won't be any naked flames on the booth or something like that. I don't know what people do and why they have to ask these questions, but whatever.
Wow, maybe you should have that would make your booth stand out.
I'm pretty sure people try to have barbecues on the trade show, and it's an Australian conference after all, so you'll have the barbie at some point.
It doesn't really matter if you barbecue what's on the grill or barbecue the booth next to you. Yeah, as long as there's a fire there, but we're happy.
For sure it happens. And I mean, only in Australia you see people just like. So many people, they're just handing over beers like past 3 p.m. It's just giving away beers like that. You don't see that in Europe. I just got to tell you, sorry, we're a bit kind of more tame.
But hey, thanks again, man. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully you get some good feedback out of this.
Hope so. And well, thank you, Ahmad. Thank you, Shaun.
Catch you, Evren.
Cheers.
So we always ask our guests 2 questions towards the end. So the first one is, what is something that you think needs to die in our industry? So normally we ask about mining, but you can kind of broaden that a little bit to your profession as well. So what is an idea, a concept, a behavior that you think we need to jettison out of what we do?
That's a really good question. I think it would be this idea that you structure your investment on the basis of tax. I find it really silly when you've started an exploration program that is going to take years and years and years, and the first thing you've done is ensure that you're in like the BVI or the Channel Islands. What good is that going to do you until you actually have a producing asset? But what it might do is stop you from being able to protect yourself in the event that things go potty. I also think that one of the things that needs to die is the idea that that illegal mining isn't different from artisanal mining. There are artisanal mining projects out there, but the scale of the illegal mining that I now see in certain countries is clearly backed by corporate backers, and it's large scale, and it puts people's lives at risk, and it doesn't lead to the development of a lot of these areas surrounding the mines. People are only in it for themselves, and there's a big difference between that and the sort of destruction it can wreak on a country's natural resources and communities than a couple of people panning for gold on the periphery of a mining footprint. And when we confuse those 2 terms, we are painting what I view to be a considerable evil with something that people talk about when they buy a beer or cheese or bread, in using this artisanal language. They are not the same thing. One is often outlawed by the state. Indeed, Uganda has introduced significant criminal penalties for those involved in illegal mining. And one is a sort of, exactly as it sounds, an artisanal activity. But when thousands of people from outside of a particular district have invaded a mine and are involved in highly centralized, organized, and fully financially accounted for work crews to develop resources that are then shipped somewhere else and abroad, and the government doesn't get any tax, and the local government doesn't get the benefit of new roads, hospitals, or schools, that is a problem and should not be confused with the artisanal mining. So it's a part that really sort of hits the left of center in me. And I don't like it when those expressions get confused.
I think that's an excellent point, actually, because I think if you're talking about real, like national resource destruction, illegal mining, like not only destroys the resource but destroys everything else around it as well, and leaves nothing of value behind. Arguably, it probably does a poor job of extracting the most value out of the resource most of the time as well, because like people are just in it for kind of the low hanging fruit, and then they'll leave away with destruction afterwards.
And if an NGO wants to get its back up about the use of cyanide, go look at the water bottles that are being carried around with cyanide in them, so that people can use that at illegal mining sites. And these, we're talking about children now who do that. Some evils are greater than others, right? And no matter what people want to say about my clients, they're not leaving a path of environmental degradation the way that illegal miners do.
And so, last question. And so, conversely, what is something that you think needs to be maintained in our industry? Something that's fundamental to our DNA that we shouldn't forget?
Optimism. It's been said of explorers that the world of mineral explorers are the world's great optimists, and people that mining engineers. I recently said something like foolish optimists when they're looking at a feasibility study.
Misguided
optimism.
Misguided optimism.
But look, like I came back to the example of my client EnviroGold operating in my former client EnviroGold operating in the Dominican Republic. These are people that saw what was effectively a jungle site and said, well, this tailings dam is full of nasties, but there's also gold to get out. We can fix the nasties and we can get the gold out, and we can build this project up over 15 years. And they were not daunted by that prospect. And, we have a lot to do as a world if we want to meet certain environmental targets, and certain minerals are going to be key to doing that. And if everyone sort of brought this, well, you're never going to do it anyway mentality to those challenges, we're going to be in deep, deep trouble. And one of the things that saddens me when I do these cases against states is so often their defense is one of causation. Well, you were never going to be able to mine this project in the first place, so we shouldn't be liable, no matter what we did as a state. Well, I think that is that's a really cynical way to go through life. And one of the things that I love about the mining environment is when I meet one of these geo CEOs, is seeing that flicker of optimism and hope and excitement about a resource in their eyes when they meet with me. And they're like, yeah, listen, Tim, I'm never going to need your services, but man, you should see this asset. I think we're in really good hands. These are people that are still sort of, going where no man has gone before, and they're there, and they want to deliver value for themselves, of course, but also for the countries in which they're operating.
Again, I think it's an excellent point. That kind of pioneering spirit. And and often I kind of explain that, sometimes, people say that they are, the mining industry has a record where a lot of these kind of endeavors went badly. And, and I kind of explained it by saying that if you're doing something pioneering, there are going to be some car crashes along the way as well, because, that is kind of the nature of pioneering. That there's certain, if you look at kind of like your home country, the people that went out west, when the West opened up, there were huge levels of car crashes and things that went wrong for a lot of people. And I think this is kind of the modern day. This is an industry that has its probably a far greater share of these kind of problems that come up, because like most of the people are trying to do something new, and that means that there's always a risk that it could go pear-shaped somewhere along the way.
Look, there's the expression, you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. I think one of the incredible things about the space mining finds itself in now is they're trying to break a lot less eggs. There's a genuine concerted effort on the part of mining companies to continue to do something pioneering, but to do so in a way that respects local heritage, respects local law, respects the need to develop communities, and respects the environment. And again, I came to mining as someone, I'm left-leaning. When I meet these clients and I get to know their operations and what they genuinely intended for the places they're operating in, I tend to find it more inspiring. I don't ever look at it and go, that my cynicism isn't engaged when I meet them. And my wife works in sustainability, and she, for ages, she'd be like, well, I helped to rebuild the world that Tim is trying to tear down. And I think with time, she's gotten to realize that, the mining companies I work with, they have good intentions, right? And they are trying to improve their conduct. That doesn't mean that they still aren't punished for the sins of their fathers.
Yeah, and I think, so I think there's two things. One is that, most people's perception of the mining industry is, I think, a few decades old. I don't think what people are judging the industry, it's almost that kind of colonial era kind of way of companies operated. I'm not sure that, I don't think there's any company that could operate like that and still survive as a publicly listed company. And I think so. So that's, I think, one kind of aspect that mining companies get hammered for. But the other aspect is that other industries don't seem to have this kind of problem. We don't crucify the fashion industry or any of these other industries, which have also had a hugely checkered past for a long, long time. So I think there's always this kind of unequal kind of perception where on one side, you're utilizing an image on the industry that is far outdated, but then also not acknowledging that there has been quite a lot of change over the last 20 years anyways.
So maybe mining needs to be a better champion of itself, in that regard. I'll finish with an anecdote. I have a client, and one of his other projects is a lithium project in Cornwall, England. And, you asked me about surprises. About 7 months ago or so, I opened up The Guardian, of all publications, to see them absolutely praising and putting this project on a pedestal. And I rang him and I said, Richard, do you realize you got The Guardian to praise a mining project? And he said, yeah, but we need lithium. And Cornwall needs development investment. It's the perfect marriage. And so we need a bit more of Richards out there to sort of say, we're not all bad guys, and what we're doing is good and helpful towards the energy transition.
I think that's a pretty good spot to end on. Thanks a lot for joining us, Tim. This is great.
Thank you so much for having me on that. I really appreciate it.
Cheers, man. So, Shaun, towards the end of our interview, we kind of always ask our guests two questions. So the first one is, what is something, it could be an idea, a behavior, that you think needs to die in our industry, something that we need to jettison out of the industry?
I actually think it's something we touched on in our calls, and I put it on different layers, and that's this sort of bunker silo mentality at times. A lot of the companies I've gotten into, and won't mention the names, but things we've taken over or we've helped restructure, I've been pleasantly surprised. Well, actually not pleasant. It's not been pleasant. This idea that even within corporate offices, you've got these bureaucracies or hierarchies that, create these silos around different functions. There's this strong functional concentration. And I think part of the secret sauce with Xstrata and the business that I've really built here is around trying to actually provide people with a broader scope to be able to actually maybe step away from their narrow job descriptions, to actually think on a more holistic level, to work together. And I just think it lends itself to better engagement, better decision-making at the end of the day, better decisions. So we've seen that within mining companies. And I think going back to what we just discussed, I think as a sector, I don't think we don't sustain the investment in people and in innovation that's needed to solve the problems for declining grades and greater complexity and environmental challenges. I think the future is probably going to come from experience and knowledge in the sector with disruptors like we saw with the aerospace thing, going back to earlier points. Like NASA, the Russians, whatever, couldn't land a rocket, on a little pad and do the stuff that, ultimately Musk did as a risk taker who embraced failure, but got people together to do that and to essentially change the cost structure of that industry by an order of magnitude. I think it's going to probably be something like that will be needed from a more solid lens to actually out of necessity, out of need, that will probably disrupt our sector at some point. So anyway, I think the more we can break down those silos at a site level, at a corporate level, and as a sector, I think the better it'll be for all of us, and the easier it'll be to attract talent.
I think that's an excellent point. Conversely, and last question, what is something that you think we need to maintain in our industry? Something that you think is kind of fundamental to our DNA that we shouldn't forget.
I think that that sense of just problem solving, adventure, and sort of that can-do attitude. Because you think about it, as much as I've just sort of shared the thing I think shouldn't go, but it's never ceased to amaze me the incredible level of dedication and capability when you go to mine sites on the top of the Andes, up in the subarctic, some pretty hostile environments, the deserts in Australia and elsewhere, and the ability of people to really, with a high level of goodwill. I think most businesses want to work with their local communities, do the right thing in order to overcome really quite difficult problems at times to extract these minerals. And I think there's that the can-do attitude and the capability that exists, not just in one region, but all over the place, I think is something we need to do more to harness and tell that story and create a viral opportunity, hopefully, for the space.
This is a theme that often comes up on our interviews around that, if you think about an industry that would have a high proportion of people that are intrinsically motivated to do the work, like our industry, like I assume would probably be at the top end of that kind of the number of people that are intrinsically doing. You don't hear of like accountants. I have friends that are accountants and they go, mate, I go to work, I walk away, and that's it. I don't sit there dreaming about spreadsheets or things like that at the end of the day. The job is not something like that's intrinsically motivating for them. But if you're talking about people that are going to kind of the Andes or going to even your thing, going to Colombia, going to all of these, there's got to be some kind of fire inside people that kind of drives them to go to all of these places. And I think that's something that probably the industry doesn't highlight a lot of, is that that in order to be that crazy person that goes and builds a mine on the mountaintop, you got to be a little bit crazy, like that pioneering kind of spirit to go, why not build a mine at 4,000 meters or whatever we need to do, right?
Why wouldn't you want to live an interesting life, right?
That's an excellent story. That's it, Shaun. We're pretty much at the end of our interview. Thanks a lot for coming on the show. This is a great chat. I
love the way you took the conversation in natural directions. That was great.
Cheers. This episode was brought to you by Ahmad Salim and Steve Beresford, produced and edited by Sean Jeffrey, and made possible by the contributions of our many guests. It is their time and energy that really makes this podcast possible. And also, thanks to our listeners. Again, there wouldn't be a podcast if there wasn't anyone listening to it. Happy holidays and stay safe. Exploration Radio is made possible by the support of the AIG, the One-to-One Group, and the Assay, and we are an official media partner of the 2023 PDAC conference. Until next time, let's keep exploring.